Baldwin IV, the greatest military genius in Crusader history. At just 16, this teenager annihilated Saladin with 500 men against 26,000. A prodigy who controlled war horses using only his knees because his hands were already dead, forcing even his enemies to stand in awe. But here's the horrifying truth they've hidden for 800 years. The same brilliant king died at 24, completely blind, half paralyzed, rotting from the inside out. Half his arm and right hand were dead. He could not feel if pinched or even bitten. The most loyal knights had to vomit when they saw their ruler. I have secret medical evidence about how leprosy transformed a genius into a living corpse. Every haunting detail that historians have desperately tried to bury. And I'm about to reveal 3 shocking medical secrets that will forever change how you see medieval royalty. If this truth shocks you, smash that like button to help others discover what really happened behind the palace walls. Jerusalem, 1170. 9-year-old Baldwin is playing with his friends in the palace courtyard. The game is simple. Whoever can endure pain, the longest wins. They pinch, bite, and dig their fingernails into each other's arms. Everyone screams and cries, except Baldwin. William of Tyre watches in growing horror. The boy doesn't flinch, doesn't react, doesn't even notice when a playmate draws blood from his right arm. William grabs a needle and pricks the child's hand directly. Nothing, no response whatsoever. Half his arm and right hand were completely dead, William would later write with trembling hands. This is Hansen's disease, flesh-eating bacteria that devours you from the inside. It attacks the peripheral nervous system first, then spreads to skin, eyes, and face. In medieval times, this meant 2 things: certain death and the curse of God himself. The implications hit William like a warhammer. If anyone discovers this secret, the prince will never be allowed to rule. Lepers were outcasts, associated with sin and divine punishment. They were forced to ring bells to warn healthy people of their approach. Only 3 people know the truth: William, King Amalric, and Agnes of Courtenay. They make a pact of silence that will haunt the kingdom for decades. But you can't hide biology forever. The bacteria are already spreading through the child's nervous system like an invisible army. His right hand grows weaker each week. Simple tasks become impossible. He watches in horror as his dominant hand refuses to grip a sword hilt, fingers sliding off metal like they're coated in oil. Writing becomes agony. Yet somehow, this weakening prince must be trained to rule the most important kingdom in the Christian world. William watches his brilliant student learn warfare, diplomacy, and statecraft, while knowing that every lesson might be pointless. The cruel irony cuts deeper than any sword. While the world sees a promising prince blessed by divine favor, this young prince carries the very disease medieval society considers God's ultimate curse. People believe only the most wicked sinners contract leprosy. The young noble learns to hide the weakness, switching his sword to his left hand, developing an iron poker face when injuries occur. But inside, a 9-year-old boy begins to understand that his body is betraying him in ways no enemy ever could. The conspiracy of silence begins. Palace physicians are sworn to secrecy. Special tutors are brought in to teach adaptive techniques. Everything must appear normal. But Baldwin's secret refuses to stay hidden forever. 7 years later, he will face his greatest test and prove that sometimes miracles come from the most broken vessels. November 1177. Saladin's 26,000 elite troops are marching toward Ascalon like a tsunami of steel and death. Most of the Crusader army has moved north to help Raymond attack Hammer. Jerusalem stands virtually defenseless. The prince is 16, still recovering from malaria, and his right arm is completely useless, a withered, nerveless appendage hanging at his side. He commands maybe a few hundred knights against the most powerful military force in the Middle East. Every advisor begs him to hide behind Ascalon's walls and pray for rescue. The 16-year-old monarch refuses. In an act that seems like pure madness, the teenage leper monarch decides to attack. His own commanders think he's lost his mind along with his health. November 22nd, Saladin reaches Ascalon, supremely confident. His force outnumbers the Christians by 50 to 1. Victory seems inevitable. The young king makes a desperate gamble. He issues an arrière-ban, a call for every able-bodied man to join the fight. Farmers drop their plows. Merchants abandon their shops. Even clergy grab weapons. What happens next defies all military logic. Trapped inside Ascalon's fortifications, with Saladin's massive army surrounding him, Baldwin does the unthinkable. He breaks out. Leading his tiny force in a charge that should have been suicide, he smashes through enemy lines like a hammer through glass. The battle at Montgisard becomes a massacre, but not the one anyone expected. Saladin's overconfident troops, spread out across the countryside looting and pillaging, are caught completely off guard. The disciplined Christian charge tears through their scattered formations. Panic spreads like wildfire through the Muslim ranks. Within hours, Saladin's mighty army disintegrates. The Sultan himself barely escapes with his life, abandoning most of his forces to death or capture. 16-year-old Baldwin has just achieved the inconceivable, a total victory against overwhelming odds. But here's the chilling detail that chronicles barely mention. Throughout this entire battle, he had to fight with only his left arm. After the victory, court doctors frantically bandage gaping wounds along his right side, cuts so deep they would cripple a normal man. Yet he fought through the entire battle without noticing the blood loss. The prince shows unusual tolerance for pain, one physician noted, not realizing he was documenting the progression of a bacterial plague that was slowly killing their hero. The Christian world explodes in celebration. Letters fly across Europe proclaiming the miracle of Montgisard. Our tragic hero becomes a legend overnight. Yet this triumph masks a gruesome truth that's about to surface. While Europe celebrates their teenage hero, the prince's body wages war against itself. The bacterial plague advances with methodical precision. What began as numbness becomes systematic destruction, spreading through his nervous system like liquid fire. First, his right arm surrenders completely. The limb that once wielded a sword now hangs useless, forcing him to relearn every basic task. Palace scribes whisper about his increasingly illegible handwriting, not knowing they're documenting medical history. Then his leg joins the rebellion. The most athletic prince in Christendom begins stumbling on stairs he's climbed 1,000 times. Mounting his warhorse becomes an ordeal requiring assistance, a humiliation for someone who once controlled steeds with his knees alone. Finally, his face starts failing. The right eyelid refuses to close, leaving his eye exposed to constant infection. His tongue grows numb, turning royal pronouncements into slurred mumbles. When he speaks, courtiers must lean close to understand their sovereign. This broken champion could be sliced open and never realize it. Minor cuts fester into wounds that won't heal. Muscles shrivel and contract. His fingers curl into claw-like shapes that cannot be straightened. Hands that once commanded armies now struggle to hold a cup. Palace life becomes an elaborate theatrical performance. Every morning, the ailing king endures 2 hours of stagecraft. Thick, white powder conceals the discoloration and scarring. Rouge creates the illusion of healthy circulation. Artificial eyebrows replace the ones that have fallen out. Custom clothing hides the progressive deformity. Long leather gloves conceal his twisted fingers. Flowing robes disguise his withered frame. Specially designed shoes protect feet that can no longer feel injury. Even his behavior must be carefully choreographed. He learns to sit at angles that hide his affected side. He speaks in short sentences to minimize his speech difficulties. He avoids physical contact that might reveal his condition. The psychological torture surpasses the physical decay. This warrior saint knows he will die before age 25. He cannot father children to continue his bloodline. Every day he must pretend to be a healthy monarch while his body systematically shuts down. Here's the cruelest irony of all. While his subjects praise him as blessed by God, this cursed king carries the exact affliction medieval society considers God's ultimate curse. They believe only the most depraved sinners contract leprosy. Each morning, the leper king transforms into a healthy ruler. Each evening, he returns to being a failing young king. The weight of this double life would crush most people. But our protagonist doesn't know the worst betrayal is yet to come. because his own mother is about to make a decision that will doom everything he's fighting to protect. The betrayal begins with a mother's desperation. In the spring of 1180, Agnes of Courtenay, the Leper King's mother, makes the most catastrophic decision in Crusader history. In a panic to prevent a coup attempt by Raymond of Tripoli, she hastily arranges for her daughter Sibylla to marry Guy of Lusignan. This is political suicide disguised as strategy. Lusignan is everything a medieval king should never be: arrogant, a disastrous leader, and universally despised. He's a recent arrival from Europe with zero experience in Middle Eastern politics. Worse, he openly shows contempt for his diseased brother-in-law. Baldwin realizes the devastating truth immediately. He has just handed the keys to his kingdom to the man who will destroy it. The tension explodes 4 years later, when the deteriorating ruler, now nearly blind and paralyzed, decides to strip Guy of his powers. But this reckless usurper refuses to comply. He barricades himself in Ascalon and prepares for civil war. What happens next is one of the most humiliating scenes in royal history. The afflicted sovereign demands to be carried to Ascalon, along with the high court. Picture this: the king of Jerusalem, blind and broken, transported on a litter like a piece of furniture, arriving at his own city. From the battlements and towers, citizens watch their sovereign ceremoniously raise his trembling hand to knock on the gates, demanding entry to his own territory. Guy refuses to open the gates. The king of Jerusalem is literally locked out of his own city by his brother-in-law. The humiliation triggers something worse than political crisis. It accelerates his physical decline. Stress floods his damaged immune system with toxins it cannot process. That very night, palace physicians note alarming new symptoms: fevers spiking to dangerous levels, muscles spasming uncontrollably, and blackouts where consciousness simply vanishes. Each political battle steals precious time from his shrinking lifespan. The cruel mathematics become undeniable. Every day spent fighting Guy's treachery is a day carved from an already brief existence. The symbolism is devastating. Here's our tragic hero, the champion of Montgisard, the savior of Jerusalem, reduced to begging for admission while his subjects watch in horror from the walls. His response shows political genius even in extremity. He travels to Jaffa and immediately installs his own governor, effectively stripping Lusignan of half his county. In Acre, he summons his council to seize Guy's remaining territories. But the damage runs deeper than politics. The constant warfare is literally killing him faster. He can barely speak clearly anymore. His hands shake uncontrollably. Simple tasks like signing documents become agonizing ordeals requiring multiple assistants. Palace physicians note alarming new developments: sudden fevers, difficulty swallowing, and periodic loss of consciousness. The bacterial plague has spread to his internal organs. Meanwhile, Guy allies himself with Reynaud of Châtillon, a psychotic warmonger who delights in provoking Saladin. Together, they form the War Party, aggressive newcomers who believe military force can solve everything. The tragic irony cuts deep. This cursed king must fight a three-front war. Saladin threatens from outside, Guy schemes from within, and leprosy devours him from inside his own body. Every day becomes a race against time. He knows he's dying, but he also knows that his death will trigger the exact catastrophe he's spent years trying to prevent. Lusignan will inherit the throne and drive the kingdom straight into Saladin's waiting arms. The psychological torture is unbearable. Our protagonist can see the future with crystal clarity. Lusignan's reckless leadership will undo everything. Montgisard will become meaningless. Jerusalem will fall. The Crusader dream will die. But the Leper King has one last card to play. One final gamble that will prove the power of will over flesh. This doomed monarch is about to perform his greatest miracle. 2 years after the political humiliation, the ultimate test arrives when the ailing monarch is at his weakest. Saladin besieges Kerak Castle with 30,000 warriors. Lusignan, serving as regent, refuses to march out and fight. The High Court rebels against Guy, threatening civil war. The kingdom teeters on the brink of collapse. And the Leper King, he's lying in Jerusalem completely blind, paralyzed and dying. His physical condition is beyond nightmarish. Total blindness from corneal ulcers. Half his face paralyzed, making speech nearly impossible. He cannot hold anything. His hands are twisted claws. He cannot stand or walk. Open sores weep constantly through his bandages. The stench of infected tissue clings to him despite servants' desperate attempts with perfumes and fresh linens. This is a man who should be receiving last rites, not commanding armies. Yet from his deathbed, the ailing king makes the most insane decision in military history. He strips Guy of his regency and personally leads the relief force to Kerak. The logistics are staggering. Engineers design a special litter to transport the deteriorating ruler. He must be carried like cargo, but he insists on traveling to war anyway. Word spreads across the desert like wildfire. The Leper King is coming. The psychological impact is immediate and devastating. For his own troops, it's pure inspiration. Their legendary hero king, despite being half dead, still refuses to abandon them. Morale skyrockets. For Saladin's forces, it's the stuff of nightmares. Secret archives from Cairo reveal Saladin's panicked reaction. If the Leper King personally marches to war, despite being on his deathbed, we have gravely underestimated their resolve. A man about to die who still leads armies is the most dangerous enemy of all. The march becomes an epic spectacle. Day 1, our tragic hero carried 40 kilometers, his body racked with fever. Day 2, reports of the Leper King's approach spread throughout the region like a biblical plague. Day 3, both Christian and Muslim armies are stunned by the audacity. Day 4, the unthinkable happens. Saladin retreats without fighting. No battle, no casualties. Kerak is saved purely through psychological warfare. The king's reputation proves more powerful than 30,000 soldiers. This is the ultimate paradox. Our protagonist achieves his greatest military victory when he's physically weakest. His mere presence on the battlefield, carried on a stretcher, blind and dying, terrifies the most powerful military leader in the Islamic world. The cruel irony runs deeper than anyone realizes. While he projects strength and divine authority, his body is literally decomposing. Palace physicians record alarming symptoms: high fevers, difficulty breathing, and organs beginning to fail. Yet somehow, this living legend has just saved his kingdom through pure force of will. The Leper King returns to Jerusalem as a living legend, but the effort has cost him everything. His remaining strength is completely exhausted. Royal doctors estimate he has less than 2 years to live. The price of this miracle becomes clear. Our tragic hero has traded his life for his kingdom's survival. But there's a terrible catch. He knows that when he dies, Guy will inherit the throne and destroy everything. This victory at Kerak is meaningless unless he can solve the succession crisis. The afflicted sovereign faces his final race against time. Can he secure the kingdom's future before his body completely gives out? The clock is ticking, and our protagonist is running out of miracles. Baldwin's final gambit is as desperate as it is brilliant. Knowing death is imminent, our protagonist strips Sibylla and Guy of their inheritance rights. Instead, he crowns his 5-year-old nephew Baldwin V as co-king, appointing Raymond of Tripoli as regent. It's a last-ditch attempt to keep Lusignan's bungling hands off the throne. But his body is betraying him faster than ever. As winter deepens into what will be his final year, darkness claims his world entirely. The corneal ulcers achieve their victory. He can no longer see the faces of advisors who depend on his wisdom, cannot read the documents determining his kingdom's fate. Palace scribes must read aloud reports that once took him minutes to absorb. By summer's oppressive heat, even words abandon him. The facial paralysis advances with surgical precision, paralyzing muscles that once commanded armies. Now he communicates through painful scratches on parchment, each letter a battle against trembling hands that barely obey his will. The medical horror accelerates beyond all previous boundaries. Palace physicians document symptoms that read like a descent into hell. Seizures racking his wasted frame, swallowing becoming agony as throat muscles fail, organs shutting down in systematic surrender. Royal doctors estimate 6 months, maybe less. Meanwhile, Guy sabotages every attempt at reform. He refuses to attend the annulment proceedings for his marriage, barricading himself in Ascalon with Sibylla. He's essentially holding the royal succession hostage, betting that the ailing monarch will die before forcing the issue. It's a grotesque standoff, a failing king racing against time versus a power-hungry usurper counting down the days until inheritance. The Leper king must arrange the kingdom's future while unable to see, speak, or even hold a pen steady. Every legal document requires multiple assistants. Every decision must be communicated through painful, laborious gestures. The psychological torture is unbearable. Our tragic hero can envision the future with terrifying clarity. Guy will inherit the throne and immediately make catastrophic military decisions. Saladin is waiting, watching, preparing for the moment the Leper king dies. The kingdom will collapse within years. Everything he fought for, Montgisard, Kerak, 11 years of desperate resistance, will become meaningless the moment he draws his last breath. Yet Baldwin persists with iron determination. He dictates his will with trembling hands, arranges financial transfers to keep money away from Lusignan, deploys loyal knights to protect young Baldwin V, and sends desperate letters to European monarchs begging for intervention. The cruel mathematics of death versus politics consume his final months. He knows exactly how much time he has left, and he knows it's not enough. As autumn arrives, Agnes of Courtenay dies, leaving the king completely alone during his final descent. His mother, the woman whose marriage decision created this entire crisis, passes away just when he needs support most. Winter brings the final medical catastrophe. High fevers alternate with violent chills. His breathing grows labored and irregular. Sepsis from his infected wounds slowly poisons his blood, turning his skin a sickly yellow-grey that no amount of royal makeup can disguise. Palace physicians can no longer hide their alarm. Internal organs are failing. The bacterial plague has spread throughout his body like an unstoppable wildfire. Still, the Ghost King clings to consciousness with supernatural determination. He must survive long enough to secure the succession. Young Baldwin V needs protection. Raymond needs official authority. Guy must be permanently excluded. But time is the one enemy this warrior king cannot defeat. Every day becomes a desperate gamble. Will his body hold out long enough to complete his final arrangements? Can willpower alone keep him alive when biology demands surrender? The kingdom's fate hangs on the biological timeline of a 24-year-old's failing body. Spring 1185 arrives like an executioner's blade. His final battle is about to begin, not against Saladin or Guy, but against death itself. And death, unlike his other enemies, has never lost a war. Spring 1185, the Leper King's final agony begins. Week 1, fevers of 104 degrees consume his wasted frame. He cannot keep food down. Palace physicians watch helplessly as their sovereign's body temperature fluctuates wildly between burning heat and bone-chilling cold. Delirium sets in during the worst episodes. Week 2, violent seizures rack his entire body. Witnesses describe his limbs thrashing uncontrollably, while consciousness flickers in and out like a dying candle. The infection has reached his brain. Week 3, his lungs fill with fluid, making every breath a struggle. His weakened heart beats irregularly, sometimes racing, sometimes stopping for terrifying seconds. Palace attendants take shifts listening for his breathing through the night. Week 4. The doomed sovereign drifts between consciousness and oblivion. When lucid, his mind remains sharp as a blade, but his body has become a prison of rotting flesh. The medical horror defies description. Massive swelling from blood poisoning distorts his features beyond recognition. Each breath sounds like drowning. The stench of infected tissue permeates his chambers despite constant attempts at cleaning. Yet even as his organs systematically shut down, the king refuses to surrender. His death watch includes only those who truly matter. William of Tyre sits beside the bed, the teacher who discovered the prince's conditions 16 years ago. The old scholar weeps silently, knowing he's witnessing the end of his greatest student. 7-year-old Baldwin V clutches his uncle's unfeeling hand, too young to understand that he's about to inherit a doomed kingdom. Raymond of Tripoli prepares to assume regency, knowing the weight about to fall on his shoulders. Guy of Lusignan remains conspicuously absent, still scheming in Ascalon while his brother-in-law dies. The king's final conversations, reconstructed from court records, reveal his character even in extremity. To William, "You taught me to live as a king, but could not teach me how to die as one." To Raymond, "Protect the boy, do not let Guy." To young Baldwin IV, "You will be king, but be wiser than your uncle." March 16th, 1185, the end. 6 a.m. The king regains consciousness one final time. With tremendous effort, he turns his sightless eyes toward Jerusalem, as if trying to see his beloved city one last time. 10 a.m. His final words barely audible, "Jerusalem, may you endure." 11:35 a.m. King Baldwin IV's heart stops beating. He is 24 years old. The immediate cover-up begins instantly. News of the royal death is suppressed for 48 hours to prevent panic and give Raymond time to secure the transition. Guy's faction is barred from approaching Jerusalem. Baldwin V is rushed under heavy guard to safety, while political maneuvering explodes behind closed doors. News of the passing spreads through Jerusalem like a plague of despair. Servants who watched him fight impossible odds now weep openly. Even hardened knights who served through decades of war struggle to accept that their seemingly immortal leader has finally fallen. The man who saved Jerusalem from Saladin has fought to his last breath, not for personal glory, but for the survival of the kingdom he loved more than his own life. But death is only the beginning of this tragedy, because our protagonist's worst fears are about to come true with devastating accuracy. Every prophecy he made about Guy's leadership will prove appallingly correct. The gates of hell are about to swing open. Our tragic hero's carefully constructed plan collapses within 17 months. Just 17 months after his uncle's death, 7-year-old Baldwin V dies suddenly of unknown causes. Historians debate whether it was disease, poison, or simple childhood illness, but the result is catastrophic. Jerusalem's guardian's chosen successor is gone, and the succession crisis explodes into open warfare. The news shatters more than succession plans. It breaks the last piece of hope binding the kingdom together. In Tripoli, Raymond stares at the messenger's letter, hands trembling. The boy he swore to protect is gone. The regency he accepted as sacred duty has evaporated like morning mist. For 17 months, the kingdom has held together through sheer momentum, powered by the Leper King's dying wishes and the innocence of a child ruler. Now that momentum dies with a 7-year-old's last breath, the power vacuum creates a feeding frenzy that tears the kingdom apart instantly. Within weeks of the child's burial, Sibylla stages a brilliant coup while Raymond is away in Tripoli. Moving with lightning speed, she seizes control of Jerusalem, declares herself queen, and immediately crowns Guy as king in a ceremony that violates every legal precedent. Raymond arrives too late to stop the coronation. Feeling utterly betrayed after years of loyal service, he makes a decision that shocks the Christian world. He refuses to acknowledge Guy's authority and enters into secret negotiations with Saladin. Think about that for a moment. The most experienced Crusader lord is now seeking alliance with the Muslim enemy rather than serve under Lusignan's disastrous rule. The kingdom fractures into armed camps. Two rival governments claim legitimacy. Knights don't know which banner to follow. Military coordination becomes impossible just when Saladin is preparing his final assault. Guy's catastrophic leadership manifests immediately. He allows Reynaud of Châtillon to attack Saladin's trade caravans, breaking the fragile truces that the deceased hero had negotiated. When Saladin demands justice, Guy lacks both the authority and wisdom to control his subordinates. The accuracy of Baldwin's predictions becomes terrifyingly clear. Guy destroys the kingdom through catastrophic mismanagement, exactly as foretold. Saladin exploits the internal divisions with surgical precision. The succession crisis triggers civil war just as the ailing king warned. Everything collapses within years of his death, fulfilling every dark prophecy he made from his deathbed. The tragic irony cuts deep. Our protagonist spent 11 years successfully containing Saladin's power, but his own family destroys the kingdom in less than 2 years. The psychological warfare advantage that the monarch had carefully built over decades evaporates overnight. Saladin no longer faces the legendary Leper king who defeated him at Montgisard. Instead, he confronts a divided kingdom led by an untested fool. Muslim chronicles record Saladin's reaction to Guy's coronation. The Franks have delivered themselves into our hands. By late in the year, the situation has become untenable. The kingdom that our tragic hero died protecting is already functionally dead. Guy commands no real authority. Raymond controls the north independently. Military units operate without central coordination. Saladin recognizes the opportunity immediately. After years of cautious maneuvering around the Leper King's strategic brilliance, he can finally move decisively against a paralyzed enemy. Everything our protagonist sacrificed his health, happiness, and life to prevent is about to unfold exactly as he predicted. July 4th, 1187. Lusignan makes the most catastrophic military decision in Crusader history. Against all strategic logic, he orders 20,000 Crusader troops to abandon their water sources and march across waterless desert in a 113-degree heat to pursue Saladin's army. This is exactly the kind of reckless decision the deceased king spent years avoiding. Experienced commanders like Raymond of Tripoli beg Guy to reconsider. "We'll be marching to our deaths," they warn. But this bungling usurper, desperate to prove his courage after years of humiliation, refuses to listen. The Leper King would have recognized Saladin's trap immediately. The Muslim commander has deliberately positioned his forces to lure the Christians away from defensive positions into the killing ground of his choosing. The march becomes a death sentence executed in slow motion. Under the merciless sun, knights collapse inside their metal armor. Horses die from dehydration. Foot soldiers begin hallucinating from heat stroke. The army stretches into a vulnerable column snaking across barren hills. By afternoon, Saladin springs his trap. Muslim forces appear on every horizon, surrounding the dehydrated Christian army at a place called the Horns of Hattin. What follows isn't a battle, it's a massacre. The Crusaders, weakened by thirst and heat exhaustion, cannot mount effective resistance. Knights who had terrorized Muslim armies for decades fall like wheat before the scythe. The flower of Christian nobility dies choking on dust and their own blood. Guy himself is captured alive, along with most surviving nobles. The true cross, Christianity's most sacred relic, falls into Muslim hands. In a single afternoon, Lusignan destroys what our tragic hero protected for 11 years. October 2nd, 1187, Saladin marches unopposed into Jerusalem. The holy city that the Leper King died defending surrenders without significant resistance. 88 years of Crusader rule end exactly as our protagonist predicted, through internal division rather than external conquest. European reaction is immediate and devastating. When news reaches the West, Pope Urban reportedly dies of grief. Shockwaves trigger the Third Crusade, but the damage is irreversible. The vindication of the deceased hero's warnings unfolds with chilling accuracy. Guy's disastrous military leadership destroys the army just as predicted. Saladin conquers Jerusalem within 3 years, exactly as foretold. Internal divisions cause the kingdom's collapse precisely as the king warned. Everything falls apart immediately after his death, proving every prophecy he made during his final, agonizing months. Modern historians unanimously agree. If the Leper King had lived another decade or secured competent succession, Jerusalem might have survived for centuries. The death of one 24-year-old changed Middle Eastern history. The final irony pierces like a dagger. Our tragic hero saved Jerusalem from Saladin's military genius, but couldn't save it from his own family's stupidity. He had fought 3 enemies simultaneously: Saladin, leprosy, and political treachery. Our protagonist defeated the first 2, but ultimately succumbed to the third. The teenager who controlled war horses with his knees, who defeated impossible odds through pure willpower, who ruled a kingdom while his body rotted away, had accomplished what no one thought possible. He just couldn't accomplish the inconceivable forever. In the end, our tragic hero proved that legends aren't defined by how long they live, but by how greatly they burn while their light lasts. So there you have it. Our tragic hero, once called the most blessed ruler in Christendom, died in putrid agony as his kingdom crumbled exactly as he predicted. Modern medical experts confirm what medieval doctors couldn't understand. All of this could have been prevented. With today's knowledge, the Leper King could have lived to 60 and ruled successfully. But in the 12th century, Hansen's disease was a death sentence wrapped in divine curse. The ultimate irony is staggering. The young man who claimed no divine appointment, who demanded no absolute obedience, who built no monuments to himself, spent his final decades proving that true leadership transcends physical limitations. His legacy isn't measured in years ruled or battles won, but in the inconceivable made possible. He defeated the greatest empire of his era with a disabled body, proved that greatness comes from character rather than perfection, became a living symbol that willpower conquers biological destiny, and saved Jerusalem for 30 years through pure force of personality. The next time you think life is unfair, remember the teenager who ruled a kingdom from a stretcher, conquered Saladin with one functioning arm, and left behind an eternal legacy in just 24 years of life. Our protagonist, proof that legends don't need to live long, they just need to live greatly. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next investigation.